welcome back to yet another episode of Ball with Y'all. A beautiful Wednesday edition here for you. A little different this week, and of course, we'll get into why that is the case here shortly. But as always, we're so thankful that you chose to join us, whether that's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Breaker, or on YouTube at BWY Productions. My name is Shawn Johnson. I'm here with Mr. Zach Gray. Zach, how are you doing today?
I am praying that I am able to get on a flight tomorrow to go to Ole Miss and Talladega to do some on-the-scene reporting for Ball with Y'all. And I'm pretty good. How about yourself?
Well, kind of like you got into there are some external factors, some Mother Nature that is threatening Ball with Y'all's enjoyment of the weekend upcoming, which is a little disappointing. I'm not a big fan of Hurricane Ian right now, and that's also why we didn't have a Monday show this week for reasons beyond our control, and also why we will not have a show later this week as well. I'm not entirely confident that either of us will be in any position to record a show later in the week. So we're going to do one show this week, and we're going to cover a lot of ground in the process.
That sounds like a deal to me. Let's get it rolling.
All right, let's get into our opening segment with a recap of week 4. Let's crack it open. So Zach, we had a lot of great games before we got into the actual Saturday slate. Looking in the earlier or the later portion of last week, we saw Syracuse get off to a 4-0 start. We mentioned that this Virginia game was going to be huge for them. Looking at their upcoming schedule, all of a sudden the Orange are looking pretty good.
The ACC right now is full of teams that are very weirdly 4-0. I didn't have FSU and Syracuse being undefeated. I honestly didn't really see NC State being undefeated at this point too. So the ACC is wide open. I do think Syracuse is in for a rude awakening when they play NC State at Clemson, Notre Dame at Pitt, and Florida State 5 weeks in a row. That's a bit of a tough stretch. But until then, they're 4-0 playing Wagner this week, so 5-0 essentially. And I'm proud of the Orange. Good work. Dino Babers, good job up there. Virginia's a tough team to beat. But they did. So congrats to them.
Yeah, and to that point as well, Virginia, they were a 9.5-point dog going into this game and just narrowly gotten beaten by the Orange. So overall, a very strong showing for the Cavaliers. And, it's first season for Tony Elliott. Tony Elliott coming in from Clemson as the OC there. Now he's the head coach at Virginia. They're going to go through some growing pains, but even still a 2-2 start against a pretty strong Syracuse team here is not underwhelming, to say the least.
Correct. I would agree.
Looking at the rest of the night, we actually saw one game that kind of took – I don't know if it took you off guard. It took me off guard. Boise State lost to UTEP 27-10, and then in the process fired their offensive coordinator. What was your takeaway seeing that?
Boise State not making a case for a good conference expansion. UTEP, not good. Not good in a long time. Boise State, pretty good sustained success. But obviously they've been kind of teetering off of that the last couple of years, especially since Harsin left. I feel like Harsin was the last time they had a really good team in the 2019-2020 era. Alvarez, not been a good coach for them. Had a subpar year for their Sanders last year and really not off to a good start this year. Firing your OC after 4 games, less than ideal. Losing to UTEP by 3 scores, less than ideal. I do miss seeing the Blue Turf have a ranking by them on TV. So yeah, they're in some serious situations right now, especially as we're going into this conference realignment era, where you got to think Boise State, San Diego State are teams that might be getting picked off by teams like the Big 12, the Pac-12, depending on what happens there. Not making a strong case for themselves right now.
And to that point as well, UTEP, much like Virginia being a strong underdog, UTEP was a 16.5-point dog at home against Boise State here and won by that margin. Incredible.
Vegas does get a couple things wrong.
Well, I mean, I think they just had one character wrong. If they had just put a -16,
yeah, it should have been plus.
They'd have been fine.
Right.
They clearly were not on top of their game. Going into the Saturday slate, though, we did have a lot of great action in the SEC, outside of the SEC, some late night action, some early action. It did not disappoint throughout the day. We saw Georgia kind of get pushed around a little bit by the Kent State Golden Flashes. alma mater of Nick Saban. Zach, what were your thoughts watching Georgia allow 22 points?
Well, like we said on the show previewing the week, we thought Kent State would give them a really good game, take them down to the wire, put their defense on their heels. No, we didn't have any of that. Nobody did. A little bit shocking, especially when it was 12-10 at one point. I mean, it was almost a one-score game going into halftime until the Georgia touchdown with 8 seconds left in the first half. So props to Kent State. That's cool. I think Georgia needed a little bit of a wake up. I mean, obviously they've kind of been overperforming, if you will, with how well they've been playing. This is a good little reminder. You're not perfect yet. We still got SEC play going into. Georgia just has such an easy start, though. I mean, looking past this game on Saturday, they go to Missouri. Goodness gracious, I'm so sorry, Tiger fans. They go to Auburn. Goodness gracious, I'm so sorry, Tiger fans. And then they play Vanderbilt. Goodness gracious, I'm so sorry, Commodore fans. So, yeah, I mean, George, like we said, kind of beginning of the year, Georgia's probably just going to walk through the season. Now, I want to point back to what you said a few weeks ago. Tennessee, we'll get to that game in a second. That game looks more and more important as we go further each week. But on the Georgia front of things, yeah, it happened. But the best noon game was the game that happened with Wake Forest and Clemson. Mr. Johnson, what did you think about that game?
So of course, I picked Wake Forest on the show, and I picked him by the slimmest of margins. I believe the score I had was something along the lines of 38-37, somewhere in that neighborhood. And as the game progressed, I was like, hey, that's fairly reasonable. Wake Forest is either winning or in position to take the lead continuously throughout this game. I believe at one point in time, the score was like 28 to 20 or something along those lines, somewhere in that neighborhood. It's like, this sets up well to potentially get there. And then Clemson rips my heart out and sends it to overtime. But I was like, okay, you know what? An overtime game is cool, right? And what was really interesting about that whole game was Clemson did an incredible job defensively. And you wouldn't necessarily say that looking at the scoreboard. But what I saw was in the first half, Clemson was being ravaged by Wake Forest's passing game, not by completed passes, but by the fact that they were just decimating Clemson's inexperienced secondary. So there were so many pass interference calls. I believe they had at one point in time, I want to say as many as 10 penalties for over 100 yards. At some point, Clemson said, okay, fine. We're not going to let Sam Hartman destroy us. We're going to put two safeties back. And we're going to not, they didn't stack the box, but they did a great job stopping the run. We're to the point where Wake Forest, when they were trying to run it down Clemson's throats, it worked for a little bit, but at some point it didn't. And when it stopped working, that's when Wake Forest offense slowed down. So kudos to Clemson. It was not exactly the type of game you want to play, but especially with North Carolina State up ahead, it's good to see their offense is capable of putting up that many points.
Yeah, I was surprised that Clemson's offense was able to keep up with how bad Clemson's defense could have been at certain points in that game. Piggybacking off of that game, I got to say, too, Clemson kind of set up kind of like Georgia, where I think Clemson is not a top 4 team, but they're going to go undefeated. Yes, I know they're playing number 10 NC State this week. I think NC State is not the 10th best team in the country. I don't think Clemson, is going to play a team that's of a caliber of a team that would be in the playoffs, but they're going to get there because they're going to be undefeated. That's just my take. I don't see Clemson losing, not because they're great, just because of who they're playing is not great. Jumping into that 3:30 slot, Sean's Tennessee Volunteers, his team he's been riding all year, handled the Gators, almost choked at the end, but outperformed, and Sean got me really good on that pick. So congrats to you, sir. Here's your trophy.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I want to thank the Academy and and the many voters out there. No, this Tennessee game, even though I picked Tennessee to win, I was adequately concerned going into this game because I knew that this was the first time we'd actually get to see Tennessee get tested. Now, obviously, they played Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh, but I wasn't really confident that that was actually a good barometer of what Tennessee was or what they could be. And honestly, Florida gave them a run for their money early on. And I was like, okay, maybe I was really wrong on all of this. And maybe Florida is actually a fairly decent team that's just had a couple bad showings. And then Tennessee's offense came to play. And their defense did just enough. Tennessee's defense is not going to wow you. They're not going to just do wonders. They're not going to blow you out of the water. But they're going to do enough to just be serviceable for the offense. In fact, I was looking at a stat earlier, right? In fact, I was actually pretty surprised when it came to, so their offensive rank, right, is first overall. Pretty strong. Defensive rank, 95th in the country. So there's a pretty big disparity there. But overall, their offense makes up for the difference. And I'm pretty excited right now if I'm a Tennessee fan, because like you said, I think that's the only program in the nation right now that can give Georgia a run for their money in the East. And they have a couple months to get ready. I don't think they play until November, so they've got a good amount of time.
Yeah, I agree. I will say I still think Florida's a really good team, but they could have won that game. And they should have, I think, at some point. They had all the momentum. Those first couple of drives where they went scoreless in the first quarter, I think kind of set the tone for, okay, they're not able to finish these drives off. But I mean, Anthony Richardson, 453 yards passing. I think the bigger story is, for the first time, and I'd wager a long time, the SEC East has 3 teams ranked inside the top 8.
First time since the last poll of the 2012 season when Georgia, Carolina, and Florida were in there.
There you go. Point proven. Yeah, I mean, so that makes it really exciting. Last bit on that game for me, Tennessee overachieving, in my opinion. Did not see them getting through that game. Now, Tennessee looking ahead now. They do have some stuff coming up where they go at LSU, no easy game in the slightest. However, that game being at noon, I think helps them tremendously. And then they get the showdown against Alabama, which I can't believe I'm saying this. At that point, might be a top 5 matchup, which is pretty crazy to say. Other stuff in the 3:30 window that we saw, Texas Tech over Texas. Texas is not good. They had a great showing against Bama. Any thoughts on that? I saw that result. Everyone's like, "Oh, they lost to Texas Tech," and I was like, "I'm not shocked in the slightest by this."
Well, and the funny thing about Texas Tech is, and I don't know if he's come back officially yet or not, but I know that their starting quarterback had been hurt and had missed the North Carolina State game and so on. So they are not exactly fully staffed like they would like to be.
Agreed.
And Texas, meanwhile, of course, I know you're missing your starting quarterback. I get it, right? And it's an overtime loss. You've lost by a total of 10 points. No, 8 points. You lost 2 games by a total of 8 points. One being an overtime, one being by a game-winning kick at home. I don't think it's horrible right now for Texas, but the flip side of it is I've even seen and heard some rumors that if the West Virginia game this weekend doesn't go well, Sarkisian's seat might get very, very warm. And it's kind of frightening if I'm a guy like Arch Manning sitting here thinking I'm going into a good program just 2 weeks ago, and all of a sudden everything is going straight down the toilet. So I'm not exactly encouraged right now if I'm a Texas fan, but I'm also not super concerned yet. Again, 2 losses by 8 points, not awful, but not great.
No, but do you see Texas not losing again the rest of the year? I mean, because at this point, I see them being 8-4. Is that really that impressive? It's Texas.
They have 4 more ranked games on their schedule. At best, they will win 2 of those.
Right. And who's to say they don't lose to an Iowa State or a TCU who's undefeated? Kansas is undefeated. I mean, it doesn't get – I mean, I don't know. I don't see Texas finishing in the top 25. But anyway, other stuff in there around that time of the day on 3:30, Miami, Middle Tennessee State. I'll take this one. Yeah, it's time to officially retire Miami from being one of the programs, if you will. I'm using air quotes here. That's over. And at best, they're a 7-5 to 9-3 team every single year. Probably not even that this year. But that program doesn't need to be playing in an NFL stadium. They need to have an on-campus stadium where they have about 35 to 45,000 seats. It's absolutely embarrassing, and anybody that thinks the U is still a thing is absolutely incorrect. And I say that as a retired fan, and that's why I'm not a fan. It's just pathetic, and people can't get it out of their heads. Okay, night games. We had 3 big ones. I'll let you start us off live from Dallas. You nailed this one too. Give me your thoughts on the A&M Arkansas game.
I was incredibly pleased with the result. To your point, I think my score was 23-20, so I'll take 23-21. That's fine with me. And A&M covered. How about that? A 1.5 point spread they covered.
Well, hey, important to note, it did close at 2.
It did close it too, so even better. Oh, so a push. Okay,
It
that's
pushed because I
whatever.
know because I had that game and I pushed.
Well,
We're done.
that push is fine. That's basically a win, right?
Yeah, I get my money back. It's free money.
Exactly. Arkansas, they did everything in their power to lose this game.
Mm-hmm.
And A&M to be fair, they did everything in their power to win this game. Like A&M is not a team when they come to Tuscaloosa in 10 days, I'm not worried about it, right? And I'll put that on the record now. Not concerned about it, especially seeing them go down with you saw Nia Smith. I think he might be out for the year with some
Big
sort of knee
loss.
big loss there. Was it knee or ankle? One of the two. Of course, him being paired alongside A Chain, a strong running backfield there. And if they don't have Nia Smith, I'm not too concerned about A&M moving forward. But Arkansas, they did largely what they wanted to against A&M. Now A&M's defense held up for the most part, but in two key moments, when you're down there at the 3 yard line, you don't need to do anything special. Just put the ball in the end zone, and your quarterback is out here jumping and trying to reach the ball
Yeah.
36 inches. Like, what do you? No, that's wrong. 36. Hold on, I can't do math. Three, three.
I'm gonna figure it out. I want you to figure this out. You got
Okay,
this.
so it was 3 yards, and how many?
Uh-huh.
So then there's 3 feet in a yard,
9 feet.
9 feet. So then it was 108
100.
inches.
Yep. There it
Okay,
is.
trying to reach the football 108 inches, which is even worse than the 36 inches I originally quoted.
Yep.
And then of course it gets punched out. I was pretty impressed by the A&M awareness to hand the ball off so it gets the run back
Oh,
continues.
that's a top tier play. You're gonna see that on college football highlights on YouTube for like the next decade. That was awesome.
I don't know how he had the awareness to do it, but nonetheless, incredible moment there. And then I don't think I've ever seen what took place to end that game. Now,
Oh,
apparently it happened 3 weeks ago in the Rice game, but who cared about that, right?
I'm not
But
really scouting Rice.
not actively watching. But to see the field goal, the game winner, well, likely game winner,
Yeah.
go off the top of the right upright. I literally had to look it up. Like, what is the actual rule associated with that? And of course, no good. It was
I
all
thought
everything that could have gone wrong went wrong for Arkansas.
Oh yeah, I thought 110% that ball was also going to land back in. I thought it like hit up in the air and was going to go over, and it got about halfway over that post and then came like 3 feet forward. Yeah, brutal, absolutely brutal. Arkansas, I think we'll get into our lines here for this upcoming week's game, but I don't think Arkansas is done. And that A&M Arkansas game is weird every single year, no matter which team is good. I mean, you can remember them in the Chad Morris era giving A&M games. So I don't put too much stock in it, but a huge win for A&M nonetheless. Uh, Other game at night, Kansas State, Oklahoma. Another future SEC member that can't beat a middling Big 12 team, a la Texas. Hello, Oklahoma. Big 12 is not going to be in the playoffs, in my opinion. Now, they still have Oklahoma State out there, which was one of my picks to make it. But it's shocking to me that Oklahoma's losing games handily too. They were down 14 with a few minutes left at home to Kansas State, who just lost to Tulane, who then lost to Southern Miss. So Southern Miss has a transitive win over Oklahoma. That was pretty shocking to me. I don't know what you thought about that, but I did not see Kansas State upsetting Oklahoma.
So, as a result of the job that I do, I had to be at work pretty early Sunday morning in the wake of this storm. So I did not watch any of this Kansas State Oklahoma game. I went to bed as soon as Alabama finished against Vanderbilt, and as soon as I saw that field goal go off the top of the right upright. So I woke up to see this result, and I thought all hell had broken loose while I was asleep. I mean, Kansas State is not exactly a program that just instills so much fear in you, but somehow this offense that was unstoppable going into week 4 here, Dylan Gabriel and the crew could not figure anything else out. And to that point as well, think about the defense that Brent Venables had actually developed and really strengthened at Oklahoma, something we had not seen in the Big 12 to this point in time. It was incredibly disappointing. And to your point as well, just a week ago, I was saying Oklahoma was going to run away with the Big 12, and now I'm not really even sure what happens there.
Yeah, and I think also too, this is what happens when you open up against UTEP, Kent State, and Nebraska. Doesn't really prepare you for big time Power Five football. Kent State actually held Oklahoma to less points than Georgia did.
I was gonna say Kent State's a quality win right
Yeah,
there.
quality loss, quality loss. Kent State. Yeah, that was shocking. And then the last game we had was our late game, which no one could find because it was on the Pac-12 network. USC Oregon State. I was really hoping to see a Beaver upset there. And they had that game in the bag until Caleb Williams figured it out, and he knew it was going to happen. USC's offense, when they're clicking, is really, really good. But USC hangs on, beats Oregon State. I think Oregon State's a sneaky team still, 17-14. USC keeps the Pac-12 afloat.
And Oregon State, much like Arkansas, did everything in their power to lose this game.
Mm-hmm.
4 interceptions thrown. You cannot. First off, it's hard enough to win a game when you're losing the turnover battle. It's another thing to when you're when you're down 4-0. It's dang near impossible to especially to have a top 10 win like that. It's just not going to happen. So incredible effort for the Beavers, but I'm also not surprised USC pulled it out in the end.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. Should we jump into this week?
Before we do that, we do need to get into. Yep, and I think you actually want to do this week. Normally you don't, but let's get into what we saw this week with the Hawaii Rainbow Wager Warriors. Now I do want to make a caveat here. We won't actually get to talk about this in the week ahead because the Rainbow Wager Warriors are off.
No,
but that's okay because Zach actually had a big weekend this past weekend. Zach, what was your record on Saturday?
3-1, which brings us almost back to 500. We're sitting 3-5 now. We nailed the point spread, we nailed the last team to score, and we nailed the over. So I'll take the 3 dubs. We missed on the over for the longest touchdown. Should have trusted my gut with that. But a great week for me finally, and you as well.
Well, I mean, my pick didn't win, but that's okay,
Well, I totally misremembered that.
No, yeah, I had New Mexico State scoring first, and they didn't do that. So
that actually is kind of shocking.
Yeah, I think I missed it by like 2 minutes.
You could have just totally lied there, so I respect you for that.
Hey, I'm nothing else. I'm a man of my word.
So, what does this put you at? Does this put you at 3-2?
3-2, yeah. Okay. So, I mean, going into what is essentially the All-Star break, because Hawaii. Fun fact: I was reading something. It said it was like a power rankings of like 1 to 130. The power rankings at Hawaii at 129th in the country.
I believe it.
How did we manage to have a segment based off the 129th best team in the country?
I think a bigger question is why don't more shows have a segment based off the 129th team in the country? This is fun. I mean, I would pay good money to watch Hawaii and Colorado State play right now.
You very well could soon.
I could. I'd love to do that. Bowl game, toilet bowl.
Next up, though, so like I said, not this weekend, but the following weekend, we do get Hawaii against San Diego State. So that should be a fun one. I already know I'm going to put whatever San Diego State is, they'll cover. They'll just throttle Hawaii. But we'll get into that, of course, next week as we approach that game. Any other thoughts on Hawaii before we move forward, Zach?
No, I'm just so proud of myself for actually doing something good in this segment. So let's move on.
Fair enough. Well, before we get into the games themselves, we did have the AP poll come out on Sunday. A lot of interesting things to dissect there. We saw some newcomers. We saw some teams drop out. Some teams drop substantially. Key takeaways for you, Zach?
Kentucky and Tennessee are ranked 7th and 8th. That's crazy. Biggest gut punch of the year so far, Kansas not being ranked at 4-0. I don't care that they haven't played anybody that impressive. What I care about is that the Jayhawks are 4-0, and we should grade on a curve, and therefore we should have ranked them. That was my impression. Thoughts, comments, concerns?
Speaking of 4-0, 2 teams that made their first appearances in the AP poll, and I think they're long overdue at this point in time. Florida State, like I said, the best team in the state of Florida right now, considering where Florida's at, considering where Miami's at, considering where UCF's at, considering where USF's at, considering where FAU's at. I could keep going. Florida State, I mean, they have the opportunity to prove it this week against Wake Forest, assuming that the hurricane doesn't change that at the time of recording. We don't really know what's happening there.
Yeah, we
Um,
don't.
so we'll see how that shakes out. But a great opportunity there for the Seminoles. Also, Minnesota coming off of a massive win against Michigan State. Really cool to see them get into the top 25, sitting at number 21 as well.
Yeah, I think Minnesota has a chance to do some big stuff this year. They really don't play anybody that challenging. Their only challenge at looking at their schedule that remains is Penn State. That's a road game. That's a tough one. But they get Iowa at home, and then they're at Wisconsin, which has not looked impressive at all. So you could very well be looking at a 10, 11 win, do I dare say undefeated Minnesota going in the conference championship game. Um, I'm proud of the Golden Gophers. PJ Fleck has that team playing good. We saw what they did in 2019 when they had that great season that ended up with them winning against Auburn in the Outback Bowl. Uh, I think Minnesota is going to be a team that's around and going upwards in the rankings for a while.
I do want to flag one more team before we move on from the AP poll. A team that we saw get throttled in week one, and we wrote them off. We said, okay, they're done for. Oregon is sitting there at number 13.
Mm-hmm.
And some people might think that that's not warranted, that's not justified. Since that Georgia loss, which was awful, and Bo Nix played horrible, since that game, Bo
Mm-hmm.
Nix has led them, obviously, to 3 wins. And in those 3 wins, 13 touchdown passes and 13 total touchdowns, sorry, and 1 interception, average passer rating of north of 180. He is crushing it right now for Oregon. And honestly, they are set up well to compete with the USCs of the world, to compete with the Utahs of the world, to maybe figure out a way to squeak into the playoff, honestly.
Yeah, and they got a pretty easy slate of games coming up with Stanford, Arizona, UCLA, Cal, and Colorado. They finish tough. Washington, Utah, both of those are home games, though, I want to point out, and at Oregon State. But there's a path there for them, I think, too, especially if we get like a one-loss ACC champ to make the playoffs, I think. Because if you go 12-1, you beat BYU, your only loss is to Georgia in week one. I think that's a good enough resume to get into. I mean, they're positioned already. A one-loss team that's 13th in the country at this point in the season is in position to win out and make the playoffs still, I think.
Absolutely. Of course, there will be a lot to dissect in the weeks and months ahead, but a lot of exciting things in the AP poll too. So we'll see how that shakes out, of course. But let's go over to our predictions and our preview for week 5 of the college football season. A lot to unpack here. We'll start it off actually where game day is going to be this week in Clemson for the number 10 at North Carolina State. Wolfpack visiting Clemson. Clemson, of course, number 5 in the country. 6.5-point favorite are the Tigers. Over under is 42.5. Zach, what do you have here?
We're going to go Clemson covering the 6.5 and the over of 42.5 as well. I think Clemson wins this game. Not going away, but it's a decent win. We're going to file this one to be 31-22.
31-22. Okay, so a fairly decent cover, but not too close for Clemson.
Correct.
So I look at this game. They are two incredibly strong defensive teams. We know not to expect too much from Clemson's offense, but we also saw this past week that they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't we haven't really been shown a whole lot by North Carolina State's offense. We saw them struggle mightily in week 1, if you recall. So I don't really know what to make of this North Carolina State team. I don't genuinely believe that they're a top 10 football team. And honestly, I feel like I learned my lesson last week to not pick against Clemson again for probably the foreseeable future. So I'm not going to do it here. I'll say Clemson. They'll pull it out, and they'll pull it out by a little bit of a narrow cover, if you will. And I'll also say that the under will hit as well. I'll go 24-16 Tigers.
I like it. More defense than we saw last week from them. I think the next best game of the week has got to be the one that I'm potentially going to be at if this storm cooperates. Kentucky Ole Miss. Ole Miss coming in 6.5-point favorite, over under 54. Sean Johnson, what say you?
So the problem with this game is lately I have not exactly been impressed by either team. I mean, I watched I watched Ole Miss struggle mightily a week ago against the Golden Hurricanes. I watched Kentucky struggle mightily against Northern Illinois. Kentucky obviously has that big win against Florida, but I'm not exactly a believer in Florida. Ole Miss is a big win against Georgia Tech, who has recently fired their head coach. So I'm not exactly, I'm not really, a big believer in either program. And also, I'm not entirely convinced that Kentucky deserves to be number 7 in the country. It seems weird. I don't really know where I feel about that one either. I look at Kentucky's offense, less than ideal. They are 88th in the country right now. Defense, though, 17th in the country, right? Ole Miss, we know that it seems like their running game is kind of the core there, but they do have a pretty strong quarterback in the form of Jackson Dart as well. So it's kind of a toss up. But I think even though he puts mayonnaise in his coffee, I think I trust Will Levis just a little bit more than I trust Jackson Dart. So I'll say Kentucky covers. I'll say that obviously as a result, they'll win outright. I'll say the under hits will go 27-14 Wildcats.
Ooh, wow. That's a lot fewer points for a Lane Kiffin offense than I would think. But I like where your head's at. So obviously, Ole Miss fan here speaking. I think both these teams are two of the most overrated teams in the country right now. 7-14, I'm hyped. I love it. Great. Obviously, I come from a family who has Wildcat blood in them, but I don't see Kentucky being 7th. I don't see Ole Miss being 14. I also don't get where line of 6.5 Ole Miss comes from. So I'm going to actually take Kentucky to win outright in this game. And I think the over hits, we're going to go 28-20. Actually, no, the under. Just kidding. That's math. 28-20 Kentucky. I think Ole Miss has looked great against some certain teams. They haven't played anybody. Tulsa was the only team that they played that's a reasonable threat of a team. And Tulsa worked them a lot offensively, especially in the second half. So hopefully fans show up for this game. I mean, I'm flying from Florida, so I'm doing my part. Looking at the 3:30 slate, let's jump into your side of town. Alabama at Arkansas. Alabama comes in to Fayetteville, a 17.5 point favorite with the over-under set at 61.
So a couple things in the law of Shawn when it comes to football. One, you don't like playing a team coming off of a loss. I don't like playing Arkansas coming off of a loss here. I also don't like playing against a team that I don't really know how they're going to respond. I don't know if it's going to be a bit of a hangover for Arkansas, knowing how close they were a week ago, or if they're going to be angry. If we're going to be facing an angry group of Razorbacks, I think 17 is pretty steep, in my opinion. I was a little surprised to see 17. I expected more along the lines of 8, 9, 10, somewhere in the neighborhood. But on the bright side, Arkansas is last in the country when it comes to pass defense, and Alabama, they're the only team in the nation that has not allowed a passing touchdown yet this year. Now, I expect that they'll probably end this week, but I'll ride with the better team here to win, but just not cover. I'll go 34-20 tied.
Okay, well, I like where your head's at because 17.5 to me seems absolutely ridiculous. In fact, I think there's going to be a point in the second half where Arkansas is actually leading in this game. Alabama on the road is not Alabama at home. It's also not Alabama that we're used to seeing. I think they win. I think they win. And I think the over hits. We're going to go 38-32 Alabama. But I think Arkansas is in this game and leading, maybe even going into the fourth quarter, but the tide is just too much at the end.
All right, I'll take it. That's something. That's a road win, and we don't get too many of those.
True, true. Enjoy it while it lasts.
So let's pass it over to let's go back to the ACC for a big matchup taking place hopefully in Tallahassee again. Don't really know what's going on there as they prepare for Hurricane Ian. We got the Wake Forest Demon Deacons coming off that loss against Clemson. They're still ranked, visiting the best team in the state of Florida. I'll say it again. The best team in the state of Florida, the Florida State Seminoles. Florida State is a 6.5 point favorite. The over-under is 65 points. Zach, what do you have here?
So Wake Forest off of a loss. I like that. FSU off of not really beating anybody that's been good, in my opinion. They're ranked because they're undefeated. and they have a loss or they have a win over an SEC school. That's not going to stop me from taking Wake Forest plus 6.5, and also taking Wake Forest to win the game outright. Uh, we're going to go Wake Forest in this game, 45-37. I think Wake Forest defense just does enough. I know FSU's had a better defense on record so far this year, but I like Wake Forest to come down to Tallahassee or wherever this game is played and take care of business against the Noles.
So this game hurts me, right? It hurts me a lot because Wake Forest, they really did me wrong a week ago. And it's hard. It's hard to overcome a heartbreak like what I endured a week ago. And I've said now 4 times on this show that Florida State is the best team in the state of Florida. And I fully believe that regardless of what I pick here. The problem is, if you look ahead, I wouldn't be surprised if Florida State loses their next 3 games. They've got this game against Wake Forest. They have to go to NC State, and then they host Clemson. At best, you're coming out of that 1-2, probably. Mm-hmm. And I'm unfortunately thinking that one of those 2 losses is going to come here against Wake Forest. To your point, they haven't really been tested a whole lot. I mean, they've gotten Boston College, they've gotten Louisville. I mean, they have a really good LSU team, and I'll say really good because you look at actually I have some stats here on LSU, which has nothing to do with Florida State, but I do want to acknowledge them. Talking about, I don't see where it is now, but long story short, LSU's defense and offense has been off the charts lately. So I do think that was a quality win for Florida State, but nothing compared to what they're going to see in the form of Clemson and so on. In this case, I'll go Wake Forest. Even though I kind of have buyer's remorse from a week ago, I'll go Wake Forest winning and Florida State not putting up too much of a fight in the process. I'll go 38-17 Wake Forest.
That's a romp. I like it.
Yeah, they're going to come down here just like Hurricane Ian is. Take us out.
Wasn't he technically coming up here?
Yes. He's coming up and coming over.
Yeah, up and over from – yeah,
we
anyway.
Also don't really know where he's coming at this point, but that's okay.
One last big game. I honestly think this might be the most impactful game on the season this week that we have coming up. Oklahoma State at Baylor. Baylor is a 2.5-point favorite, and the over-under is 56.5. Big 12 game of the year hot take. Go ahead. Take your pick.
So of the games that we picked, this is the closest when it comes to spread, right? 2.5. And last week, when we picked a game that had a 2 in the spread, it ended up being a pretty good game in the form of Arkansas A&M. So I'm pretty excited about this game. Of course, this is a matchup of our 2 conference championship winners. You had Oklahoma State to begin the season. I had Baylor. Baylor, they do have that one respectable loss, if you will, against BYU. And, of course, Oklahoma State, they haven't lost, and they haven't really wavered a whole lot in the process. They did look a little rough that first game, but overall, they've been okay. And as we know, the winner of this game will probably be in the driver's seat, seeing Oklahoma go down a week ago. Now, granted, I know Kansas exists, so I don't want to disrespect Kansas, but you have to imagine whoever wins this game will be in the driver's seat. So I will, maybe against better judgment, I will go with Baylor to eke it out. The under will hit, and they'll just barely cover. I'll go 27-23 Bears.
Okay. I like the line of thinking there. I'm going to follow my preseason prediction like yourself. I'm going to go Oklahoma State. I think this is a low-scoring affair, despite the fact that these teams are averaging 51 and 40 points a game. I'm going to say Oklahoma State 23-16, and I think Baylor doesn't lose after this game. Kind of reminiscent of last year where they had 2 losses early in the season that ended up winning out all the way through the Sugar Bowl and over these same Cowboys in the Big 12 championship. So I think Oklahoma State slows them down enough and the defense is there at the end to make some stops. But I think Baylor is still in great position after the game to still go out and win the Big 12.
It should be a good game, to say the least, especially considering the fact the line opened at 1 point from Vegas. So they're ready for this to be a monstrous matchup.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll see how that shakes out. Of course, a lot of fun action this weekend. Zach, what do you say? Let's get into our next segment, NASCAR One to go.
White flag, next one is it.
So 2 different things here. We'll get into our reaction from the race at Texas and also what we expect to take place at Talladega this Sunday. So, Zach, we had yet another non-playoff driver, non-current playoff driver win the race in the form of Tyler Reddick. What was your takeaway come Sunday night, and what felt like probably the longest race of the season? I know it wasn't really, but it felt like it was.
I mean, it was literally the second longest race of the year, so I get why it felt that way behind the 600 for May. That race, wow. So I am Team Chaos. I love it. I'm a big supporter of it. And I got to say, I really honestly enjoyed it. I like that guys were blowing tires. I think that's exciting. It's unpredictable. It's not going to be a runaway race. You had three leaders crash from the lead. Now, obviously, that takes some, I guess, respect off of the sport in general and like the cars and the tires and everything like that. But that's exciting to me. I don't want to know who's going to win. Even if the guy's got a 3-second lead and pulling away and looks unbeatable and he blows a tire, that makes the racing fun because you just can't wrap your head around it and you can't predict it. Needless to say, they got to fix that. That's like absolutely pathetic that we're having guys that put themselves in position to win and the car just fails on them. But I didn't hate the race. It was way too long. Texas needs to be 400 miles without a doubt. And it probably needs to be at night, so it's not, 95 degrees. But Tyler Reddick, second most wins in the series this year, and probably has a chance to win some more races too. You got to think too, man. He missed advancing by 3 points. He could have been into the round of 8 right now, with a chance to go win the championship too. I think. But props to him, and he just keeps putting it in RCR's face too, that they lost this guy who's going to go out there, win 3 races in a team that's replacing him for a guy who's won 3 races in the last 2 seasons combined.
I picked Kyle Busch to win this race.
Close.
He could not have possibly finished any worse than he did. He finished in last place. Yeah, strong showing for me. Granted, you had, was it Joey Logano, right?
I did. Who got second? Now, I also want to say, hey, you're just a year early because Kyle Busch is in the car that won next year anyway. So just consider it a win.
Exactly. So all in all, it's a win. But I will say it's disappointing that we have to sacrifice reliability for entertainment. I understand there's value associated with chaos. There's value associated with you don't know if the leader twice in one race is going to blow a tire and as a result lose 30 spots. I don't know. I feel like, especially when it comes to the improvements we continue to make, you should expect to see the cars be more reliable. It's like if you were to flip your power switch and it doesn't come on, like, oh well, that's part of the fun of it. I don't know what's going to be. Like that, there's a reason there is reliability associated with flipping that power switch, and when it doesn't happen, your first reaction is frustration and anger, not oh my gosh, I'm having so much fun right now. So I don't know. I feel like there's something to be said about reliability. I feel like there's something to be said about where these cars are and where they should be going into next season. I hope they make improvements. I don't know if NASCAR will actually do that. Obviously, we dealt with fires, we dealt with a number of other issues, and we just haven't been able to figure it out yet. And I don't know if we will or how long it will take. I know Justin Marks tweeted out that he thinks it's just going to take some time. I don't think we should be at that point in time. I think if we had invested the amount of time that we should have in these cars, it would not have been an issue. But here we are today, and this is the bed that we've made, and we will now have to lie in it.
Right. And the other thing, the flip side of all that too, is you can't deny this has been one of the best seasons in history in terms of chaos, excitement, unpredictability, various winners. I mean, it's been my favorite year as a fan by far. Looking at the points here now, obviously we just got some news that William Byron just got hit with a 25-point penalty, which I don't think I agree with that at all. Personally, I think 25 is steep, and I think NASCAR dropped the ball on this because they should have penalized him in the race. And their excuse is that, well, we didn't see it happen. Well, it happened right in front of you. So that's really stupid. And looking at the Bob Pockris tweet that just came out too, if Byron had been held 1 lap for that penalty, he likely would finish 25th, which is an 18-point difference from where he did. If it was a 2-lap penalty, he would have finished 28th, so likely a 21-point difference. So they went above what they probably would have given him in the race and took 25 points away, which I just think is not correct. Not agreeing with what he did, by the way, either. I just think if you're NASCAR, you either get the call right or you miss it. You can't make up for it with just a ruling like this in the middle of the week. 25 points is a lot, and it shakes the playoff points up too. Byron was 17 points up on the cut line. He's now 8 below it. Now, if you're a fan of the guys that were right around the cut line, like yourself, Chase Elliott, he's now 11 points to the good. Logano, 37 points. Chastain, 25. Larson, 23. Blaney, 22. Huge shift in the point situation for the cut line.
That situation on Sunday between Denny Hamlin and William Byron just made me love Denny that much more. I love what he does for our sport. I love how he pushes all the right buttons. And he doesn't necessarily react well when it's done to him. He always wants to retaliate and so on. But I love the guy. I can't get enough of Denny Hamlin. I can't do it.
Gross. Just gross. I can't stand him. But you're right though. It is entertaining for the sport. And I mean, yeah, I can't stand the guy, but at least he makes races entertaining. It's just funny when he can't handle what he dishes out.
Yeah. I mean, at least Joey Logano is consistent with it,
Yeah, like Joey Logano expects to get raced the way he races. I think if you're going to race like that, have the expectation that you get it back. Ross Chastain's the same situation. Ross Chastain has no problem getting moved, getting dumped, because he's done the same stuff. Like if you race the way that if you get raced the right way that you race, it's totally fair. Denny Hamlin doesn't seem to think that applies to him, and everything's always a different situation. I'll throw Chase Elliott in that bucket as well, but also it's fun, and Denny makes it exciting every time he opens his mouth and every time he's on the track. So as a fan of the sport, you got to love it.
All right, let's move over to Talladega and ignore everything you just said. So, Zach, what do we have? What do we expect here at Talladega? You should be there at the track this coming Sunday. What are your expectations for our second run at Talladega this year?
Man, stages are going to be huge, going to be crazy. You're going to have to really, I mean, the points are wide open at this point. And it seems like every time we go to this race, there's always a wreck coming to the end of stage 1 or stage 2 with like under 5 to go. If we make it through both stages without a wreck today or wreck this week, I'll be very impressed. But I think that's where your money is made. I mean, look, we're 4 races into the playoffs. We haven't had a playoff driver win. Take it a step further. We didn't have a guy in the playoffs win the playoff cutoff race at Daytona with Austin Dillon. So it's been 5 races since a playoff driver has won. And take it a step further. Fun fact, only 2 of the last 10 races have been won by a driver that's actively in the playoffs. And one of them was Chase Elliott winning by disqualification of first and second. So, I mean, we're in a really weird time right now, but I think kind of like what you were saying earlier, I agree with before our show got recording was you got to go for the points because nobody's winning these playoff races that are playoff drivers. So, first stage and second stage, that is where the bread's going to be buttered. And I'm really pumped. Never been to the track. Really hope I can get there. Really hope it doesn't get delayed until Tuesday. And buckle yourself into the couch and watch this race. This is going to be must-see TV start to finish. You're never going to have a dull moment in this race.
To your point with the stages being where the bread will be buttered, there was, of course, a pretty famous quote from Honey Boo Boo who said, "More butter, more better." And suffice to say, the more butter you can get in stage 1 and 2, the better off you'll be. And I look at some decisions that were made by playoff drivers this past Sunday, of course, a variety of playoff drivers that had some points guaranteed to them, basically, if they just stayed on the track and then chose to come off to pit early, and then maybe their day was ruined or whatever else. I just feel like you have to take the certain when there's so much unknown. You don't know if you're going to finish the race, especially given the track that we're going to. It's one thing with the tires and with the fires and everything else, with the too many men over and the equipment over too soon and the tire going elsewhere and so on. There's a lot of things that could go wrong, but especially at Talladega, you don't want to risk it. And if you have points ahead of you, even if it's just 2 points, even if you'll finish stage one in ninth place, take it, because there's no guarantee that you will
Mm-hmm.
actually finish with any more than 2 points. Who's to say you won't finish, you won't wreck out last? So to that point, I think this is definitely a race where strategy comes into play, and you got to run it knowing that points matter. Wins are cool and all, but as we've seen, nobody's doing it. So don't run for the win. If you win, cool, but the points that matter are the points you'll get throughout the race.
Yeah, I agree. And that this is why NASCAR has the stage points system. I mean, it just makes it so much more chaotic. I mean, in year like if this is 2016, like we saw literally in that race in 2016 in Talladega, guys that were in the playoffs rode between 30th and 34th for a majority part of the race because they just were like, okay, points pay at the end. I don't care what happens. Now you have guys going for the win essentially at lap 60, lap 120, and at lap 188. Makes things way more exciting, in my opinion. Um, it's time for picks, though. And who do we see? Is a playoff driver going to win this week at Talladega? The most random. Would this would be the perfect storm for a playoff driver to win, right? The one race you think a non-playoff driver wins is actually won by a playoff driver. I don't know. What say you?
That wouldn't make too much sense. And in fact, maybe I should have gone that route. But I said, you know what? Let's keep the trend of non-playoff drivers winning. Now, I'm actually going to go with somebody who's never in the playoffs this year, has not won at all this year, and doesn't really do much at any track ever. But he is a bit of a super speedway racer, if you will, a restrictor plate racer. In 25 career races here, he's won once. He's had a top five finishes on 5 different occasions, and has had 9 top 10s as well. He has not the best year, right?
Right.
But I like Eric Almirola to pull it off this
Ooh.
week. And if not Almirola, I'll go with the dark horse of Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who at this track 1 win, 6 top 5s, and on 18 races.
Okay. That is, I like those. Ricky Stenhouse makes these races so much more fun. So I just like the name Ricky Stenhouse at Talladega, and he's won there before. Good picks. I like him. Okay, I'll follow your lead. I'll go with a pick I think can win, and then I'll have a dark horse pick. The pick that's going to win this week is going to be a guy that's going to come out here. He's going to shock some people, and he's going to make up for his mistake. William Byron is going to win this week at Talladega and silence all the crap he's going to hear from this penalty this week. Who cares about the appeal for the points? He's going to the next round. I think William Byron wins and advances. My dark horse is going to be a guy that's won here multiple times. And just off the top of my head, he's won here 2009, 2012, 2014, 2016, and 2020. Oh, I'm sorry, 2017 and 2021. It's Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski is on a hot streak right now. Could have won the race at Bristol. His teammate, the car that he owns, does. Sits on the pole at Texas, gets a top 10 out of it. That guy's got momentum. This is his best track. I think he goes out there and he pulls it off. That's my dark horse pick. So give me the 24 and the 6 today.
Wow. Wow, this is gonna be a fun race if it's any of those four guys.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm pumped. It's Talladega week. What's better than that?
There's no, I mean, I would say maybe Daytona 500,
Yeah, but yeah, you're right.
but it's a playoff race at Talladega, and there's so much uncertainty associated with it as we near the final race of the round of 8 as well.
Correct. Yeah, I'm pumped. This is going to be awesome. I'm super pumped for this race. Uh, Crazy that this race used to be the cutoff for this round, which is just nuts to even about now. But the chaos doesn't slow down after this. We go straight to the Roval, which is just even more chaos in Charlotte. So, yeah, I'm pumped. This is just watch every lap. Do not miss a lap of this race. You won't be disappointed, I promise.
It will be a fun weekend and a fun cap to all the college football that we'll see on Saturday as well. But as always, I want to encourage you to check us out on social media as we wrap up the show here on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, or on TikTok. And Zach, what do you say? Let's thank him for allowing us to talk some ball with y'all.
Thank you all very much. We'll see you next week.